So let's talk about ballasting. The object, so we have one of your producers who buys this. We're just going to pick on tractors right now. It might be a little loader tractor. It might be a high horsepower four-wheel drive tractor. We're going to pull a 60-foot toolbar. They have bought that piece of equipment to do a specific job, or it might be multiple tasks. All right, the front wheel assist might be pulling a baler, a hay rake, and hauling hay in the wintertime type of thing. But the object is that they have hopefully done a little bit of homework and not just listened to the salesman, that they feel they are getting the tractor that suits their needs. Okay, they've paid for some horsepower. Now we need to get that horsepower to the ground, especially if we're pulling any type of a cultivation piece of equipment. If I don't get the horsepower to the ground, I am wasting money big time. Okay, we have things called slippage, which we're actually, you may not really see it with a naked eye, but we put that toolbar on the ground, and every time that wheel goes around, we're actually spinning on top of the ground. We're moving forward, but we're spinning. That leads to compaction. Okay, well, compaction sure as heck isn't good for anything. It leads to excessive differential wear. Differentials in those tractors, you're way into 10 figures. It leads to wear and tear on your tires, times $2,000 a tire type of thing. So it's just, and it can also lead to a phenomenon called power hop, or it's sometimes called radial wheel hop. And you can go, if you have time tonight when you get home, go out to YouTube and just Google or go to YouTube and search for power hop. You'll actually see some tractors. There is one out there, it's a John Deere tractor. The tractor is hopping so bad, there's actually daylight underneath the wheels. All right, and I have been in that situation, and I know of farm workers who have had severe neck injuries because of that. When they bounce off the seat and hit their head on the top of that cab and come back down, that's pretty severe, physical damage to the operator. Okay, so wheel hop, power hop, radial tire hop. Just search for those, and it's a phenomenon that happens with radial tires if the air pressure is not correct, and if there's not enough weight on the tractor to hold it down. All right. So that's the biggest thing, is we need to get this horsepower to the ground so we can actually do some gosh darn work with it, okay? A lot of times you're going to be looking at what we call pounds per horsepower. And I should have put in here, right in here, per engine horsepower, because there is about 56 different horsepowers out there, right? And so we do work with engines. So I have engine horsepower, I have PTO horsepower, I have belt horsepower, I have flywheel horsepower, which is essentially the same as engine horsepower, net horsepower, gross horsepower, rated horsepower. I mean, you name it, the list just goes on. All right? Pretty much your engines are sold as rated horsepower at a certain RPM. All right, so that C15 ACERT we looked up in the dyno lab over here, that is 485 horsepower at 1800 RPM. Now the engine's going to run at different RPMs, which means I'm going to have different horsepowers. Okay, so that changes on the fly as the RPM changes. Okay, but that's what the engine is sold at. It's all it is a marketing ploy. That's all that is. Okay, so I'm an engine manufacturer, and I sell an engine at 400 horsepower at 1800 RPM. Knowing very well that if I go to 1900 RPM, I might be hitting 450, 475 horsepower. I know that. Customer doesn't need to know that. All the customer knows is that here's a 400 horsepower engine that I sold him, and man, that thing performs like you wouldn't believe. He doesn't need to know there's more horsepower under that hood. And I'm sure as heck not going to tell him, because he likes that engine and he's going to come back and buy more from me. All right? So all that is marketing. Horsepower actually is irrelevant. Torque is what we want to deal with. And torque is basically the rotating effort that comes out of the back of that engine. All right? And torque is measured, and RPM is measured, and through a real simple mathematical formula, horsepower is actually calculated. You do not measure horsepower. Okay? It's actually a calculation. Okay? So when we go back to our ballasting, we want to work with engine horsepower. Okay? Typically, if you're, let's say, an ag tractor again, and maybe we're just pulling a baler, all right? We've got a round baler on the back of that thing. You know, they're kind of heavy, but we've got wheels on that baler, so there's not really a whole lot of resistance there, right? So we probably want to go with a little lighter tractor. So we would probably go with what's called a light pounds per horsepower, and that's about 85 pounds, all right? So I would take the engine horsepower, multiply that by 85, and that would be the total weight of my tractor, okay? Let's say the same tractor, we're going to use it for baling, but you know what? We've got maybe a little 24-foot cultivator. We just want to do a little bit of, you know, little plot seeding, so we'll do a little cultivation. So it's a pretty good sized engine, but not a real big toolbar. So we still want to have a little bit more weight. So then we go in what we call a middle range. And that would be like roughly about 95 to 100 pounds per engine horsepower. And then we got us a big old four-wheel drive, and we're going to put a 60-foot toolbar on there, so we really want to make that bugger work. So now we probably weight that down to at least about 105 pounds per engine horsepower, okay? So now this begs a question. I'm talking about weights. How the heck are you going to weigh your tractor? Okay? Some of you guys will have access, so down by Walmart, Torgerson's, just on the other side of the highway, there is actually a weigh scale there. And I have actually put several tractors over that scale. Okay. When I was in Geraldine, there's a local farmer who had his own elevator just on about 100 yards from the outskirts of town, and he actually had an outside scale. And I would, you know, do a little bit of work on the side for him and not charge him, and he would let me use his scale. So actually, the only way to know the weight of a tractor truly is obviously to weigh the tractor. But we don't all have that opportunity. If you've got a smaller tractor, you could probably run it through a grain elevator, you know, just kind of watch your stack and the top of your roof and all that good stuff and your width, but you get a pretty good indication of what they weigh, okay? The only other way to do it is to look at the shipping weight, and we're back to the owner's manual, okay? So that should be in the owner's manual, all right? So that's your second best way of doing it. So there are other options out there. Over in the farm mechanics, we actually have a set of scales we got from Evergreen Scale back in the early 2000s. And that's what we use the Tractor Resource Centers to weigh tractors. That was about $18,000 back in the early 2000s. Those things are not cheap, and they are very, very heavy. I mean, it's a two-person, big buff guy job just to lift the damn things, okay? I have talked with, he used to work for the Highway Patrol. In fact, you probably know him. Actually, he was with Highway Patrol. Travis Peck, you've met him? He lives he's in Chinook. Yeah, he used to work for the weights guy. Used to weigh, stop trucks and weigh them, but now I think he's with Highway Patrol now. So, but he's actually one of my diesel students. Really, he's a nice guy, really nice guy. But I talked with him, and their scales that they use now, they're just basically about the size of this table and not a whole lot thicker. So they just roll them out of the back of their pickup truck, put them in front of your semi, you roll on, and then they pick them up and put them back in the pickup truck. So, there's other options out there. If if a group of an area producers wanted to invest in something like that, I have no idea how much they cost because he was with the Highway Patrol. So, but it might be could be a cheap investment. It might be a pretty substantial investment. But the point is, it would be a very good investment if we can get a bunch of tractors or a piece of equipment weighed so we can get the right tire pressure in to have the save life on those very expensive components and tires. Okay.
As long as you haven't modified it, the factory specs should tell you?
Should tell you, yeah. But now that's a good point, as long as we haven't modified it. Okay, so I've seen a lot of tractors around with extra spray tanks on them, with extra hydraulic tanks, and with extra this and extra that. So yeah, so the modification, you have to take that into account. Yeah. Okay, tractor weights. We've talked a little about front versus rear. All right, so we only have a weight transfer. When we put when we hook on that baler, we're going to have a weight transfer. On a four-wheel drive tractor, if it is sitting in the yard on the scales, I want about, and this varies a little bit between manufacturers, Case IH wants you to have about 55% of your total weight on the front axle, 45% on the rear. John Deere, it is 51 on the front, 49 on the rear. And it's kind of a little bit, in between of all those ones, okay? A front wheel assist tractor, we want about 25% on the front axle and about 75% on the rear. Okay, so it varies just a little bit. We also need to think about side to side. The worst one I ever saw was we weighed a big bud tractor. It was a 440, I think it was. And that tractor had 1,200 pounds extra on the right side versus the left side. And we got to looking, it was an add-on. It was an extra hydraulic tank. Actually, 2 extra hydraulic tanks, because you're running a rather large air seeder. Okay? So it was an older tractor, didn't have the hydraulic capacity, put on more stuff, but everything got stuffed on the one side. So is that an issue? When I think about tires and differentials, you better believe it. Yeah, so what he actually ended up doing was moving one of his tanks off the one side and putting it on the other. It didn't equal out, totally, but it made a heck of a difference. 1,200 pounds, that's over half a ton on one side versus the other. That's a lot of weight, tremendous amount of weight, okay? So we do need to be concerned with side to side. So if you do weigh your tractors, you want to get your front rear, which, in an elevator, that's pretty, reasonably straightforward to do. Side to side, that's somewhat a little bit different. Right? You actually have to have some sort of outdoor scale where you can just weigh the right-hand side, pull forward, turn around, and come back and weigh the left-hand side. Okay. Again, we talked about radial bulge already. So let's look at let's go back. Let's look at some of this stuff here. So this is michelinag.com. Hopefully it will be if it loads up. Again, this is right out on the web for you and your producers. So this is their home page. Then we have the little bubble Michelin man, pretty cool dude. And if we come down here, I can see that I can discover a large range of tires, tractors, combines, sprayers, and trailers. And then under tractors, we also now come along, we have a whole bunch of options here, okay? So if I just pick one, I've seen this Michelin Agri rib around a lot. If it'll load in. This wasn't loading real good at lunchtime, so we'll see what happens. So there it gives a picture of what the tire looks like. This is a sales site, right? So we're going to have long tire life. We're going to have exceptional traction year round. Yeah, well, whatever. Okay? Take that with a grain of salt. We can also see here that I have a whole bunch of different sizes. That's something, let's visit about that real quick. So I have an 11.2 R24, I have a 12.4 R28, 16.9 R30. What the heck does that all mean? Then I jump over here and man, we're up into the 300s and 400s for crying out loud. Do you guys know what all that means? All right. Take some notes. This is part of your test. What's that?
It's width, height, and rim, right?
Close.
The rim,
Yeah,
sidewall.
close. You're on the right track. 11.2 R24. So that is what we would call a nominal rating. There's a nominal rating and there's a metric rating. These rather large numbers here, this is a metric sizing right here. All right, we'll get to that little bubble in a minute. So 11.2 R24. The 11.2 means that across the face of that tire, when it is correctly inflated, is 11.2 inches. Okay? The R stands for radial. If there's no R, if that was 11.2-24, that means it would be a bias ply tire. R stands for it's a radial tire. And then the 24 is the diameter of the rim, 24 inches. Okay? This is very confusing to most people. I have to keep reminding myself of what all this means when I teach the darn class. Let's jump over here to this one. 380/85 R30. Now that is a metric sizing. Okay? So this 380, that's a 380, isn't it? 390, 380. This 380 means that when this tire is correctly inflated as per the load, it will be 380 millimeters across the face of this tire. Okay? 380 millimeters. The 85 is a number. It's not inches or millimeters or anything. It's a number, but you're right, Joel. That is actually the height of the sidewall. So the bigger that number, and I'm talking about this height here, from the rim down to the ground, basically this area right in here. The larger that number, the taller this tire is going to be. So you've seen all those little, really cool little super tuner cars zipping around? All right, their sidewalls, their numbers like about a 25 or a 35. They're like about, yay big. All right, they really suck to work on, by the way. They're terrible to work on. So these are substantially bigger. So this one here is actually bigger or taller tire than this one here. Okay, and basically it's a percentage of the width to height. So it's not an inch or millimeter, it's just a number. All right. The R again stands for radial. The 30, even though this is a metric sizing, that is the diameter of the wheel and is 30 inches. Okay, so nominal sizing, metric sizing, the rim is in inches. Okay? So that kind of makes sense.
So how come on the first tire, those are all the same height then, the tire sidewall distance?
These ones here?
Yeah.
Yes. Yep, they are. Yep.
How do you know what the height is?
You'd actually have to measure it. Yeah. And actually what we're going to do is after we get done with this, we're going to get into the technical specifications. That would probably tell us there what the height is. Yep.
So
Yep.
when someone says, I can't believe the new car I bought has 20-inch rims, that actually means 40, because it's a diameter. No, so it is the diameter, not the...
Yeah, it's the diameter. It's not the radius. It's the diameter. Yep,
Okay.
yep.
So if I'm looking at this chart though, and I'm on that 30-inch rim, and the first two don't tell me the height of the tire.
These two here?
Yeah. But
Correct.
the next two have two different heights of
Right,
tires.
because this is a metric.
How would you
Yeah.
compare the ones on the right to the...
That's where we're going to get into the technical specifications,
Okay.
which is just up above. It's up about here somewhere.
So
Yeah,
what are the
yeah.
dark numbers?
That's basically just showing your rim diameter. So you see those 24? These are all 24.
Yep.
So these are 28, 30s, and all the way down to 50. This is like a pretty big damn tire. Okay? So you can go home and look at your passenger cars, your pickup trucks, and you kind of, because it doesn't matter if it's an agricultural tire, if it's a passenger car tire, if it's in my minivan, if it's on your pickup or whatever, the tire nomenclature is all the same. Okay? Okay, let's come back up here. So right up here, we have technical documentation and technical data. So this one, we're going to see if it loads up. I'm hoping to heck it will, because this actually had the load inflation tables, but even my school laptop last night didn't want to do it real good, so, and that's a better computer than what I have here. So we're going to find out if it's going to load up for us. What the hell? Oh. Ooh, damn, that was quick. I'm just about impressed. So let's come back here just a little. Oops, now let's go the other way. All right, so this, again, this is all free information for you guys. So this, just for this one tire, we actually have 17 pages of information. All right, so these can get quite cumbersome. Here's all the variation of sizes. All right, all the way through here. That's just what we looked at. And now we have to go through, we have 17 pages, probably like 10 of that's going to be the paraphernalia going to go through. Well, there's actually some good information in here. And again, this is sales, but these guys have done their homework. I mean, they spend millions upon millions of dollars on research and development, R&D, so they have done their homework. It says, a 4% traction capacity, 22%. Competitor A Well, we really have no idea who competitor A is, because I don't want to discredit anybody else. They kind of look after each other a little bit, all right? So if I come down here, here we have our first load inflation table. So let's just slide this over. The way that these guys do it, Michelin does it, is we're going to go by load per tire at different speeds. So I have 30 all the way down to 6. All right? Now this is how we're going to read. Now you'll also note, this is something that, how many of you guys like the metric system? So that makes like 2 of us. I love the metric system. I absolutely love it. See, in my mind, I can divide by 10 a hell of a lot easier than I can by 1/16 of an inch. All right? So you'll note here that we have both metric and imperial. And that's something that you guys and also your producers need to get used to. A lot of your owner's manuals, especially even in the US produced pieces of equipment, have gone to strictly metric. So pressure's all in bar or in kilograms, okay, pounds for kilograms. Pressure's in bar instead of PSI, or it might be in kilopascals, all right? So it's something that your producers do have to get used to, okay? So the way we're going to read this, your producer kind of needs to know about how fast you're going to be traveling with that piece of equipment. So combine, a big tractor, we're probably not going to be traveling very fast, all right? A baler, or a tractor with a loader, well, maybe I'm traveling a little bit faster, okay? So let's just say that we think we're going to be traveling about 6 miles an hour, and we have weighed our tractor. And let's say that the weight of that tractor, we'll just pick numbers as 12,000 pounds total, all right? So it's a little four-wheel drive, obviously, and I'm just going to have singles on each corner. So I'm going to take that weight and divide that by the number of tires that's going to carry, or the air in the tires is going to carry that weight, right? So 12,000 pounds divided by 12 would be 2,000 pounds per corner, correct? Is that right? No, 3,000 pounds. 3,000 pounds.
Divided by 4.
Yeah, 3,000 pounds. Yeah. Okay. So if I look down here, and I figure I'm just going to be traveling around 6 miles an hour max. So I start going down here. So each one of these is the weight per tire. Well, I'm at 3,000 pounds. So right here I have 2,790 pounds. So if I put that at 15 psi, if I multiply that by 4, I do not come out to 12,000 pounds. So if I went with 15 psi, my tires are underinflated. I will have sidewall damage. I will guarantee you that. And you're also going to start chewing up the tread on those tires too, because I'm underinflated. All right? So I click down one more to here. So just by raising the air pressure by 2 psi, I'm going to come right within my total target weight. All right, so I multiplied this one by 3, and I'm just a little over 12,000 pounds. So I'm just a smidge overinflated. Okay, but I'd rather be a smidge overinflated versus underinflated. All right, does that kind of make sense? Okay, so now all I have to do is I weigh my tractor. If I can figure out what speed I'm going to be running, divide that total weight by the total number of tires, because each one of these is the weight per tire, then I can figure out what my PSI should be. Okay?
So what if the tires aren't the same size on the front and back?
Then we go with 2 different scales. Yeah, okay. But we use the same, the weight. So that's actually where you'd actually need to know what the weight on the front axle is versus the rear axle. So we would take the total weight on the rear axle divided by the number of tires in the rear, use one chart, same on the front. Okay, good question. Okay. The same thing is done for you can find the same chart for your passenger car, for your pickup truck, for your semi-tractors. If they have a big, case loader, dial in the tire, and Case doesn't make tires. Kenworth doesn't make tires, all right? You look on the side, well, who the tire manufacturer is, okay? These are all out there, all right? Very few people actually know about them. I use these on probably a daily basis when I was in business, all right? The nice thing was I had access to a scale that I could actually weigh semis and cars and all that stuff on, okay? The thing also about correct inflation, we're looking after our tires, left out components and all that good stuff. Compaction's a huge issue. We're also looking after your producer as far as ergonomics. And if you want to get efficiency out of if you want to get less efficiency out of a tractor, have bad ergonomics. If that operator gets a bad back or gets a headache because he's bouncing over the cab, gets sore legs, they're done for the day. They're quitting. All right, so efficiency just went to hell in a handbasket. All right, so if you can also look after your operator, may or may not be your producer, it might be the hired hand, you're going to get more efficient use out of that rather expensive piece of equipment, okay? So just a little more than the paint color and the iron, all right? Okay, so are we okay on this one here? All right. So let's get out of here, and let's get out of here, and let's go to Firestone. So this is firestoneag.com, and I'll put these websites on the resources page that I get to you guys. Come over to here to tire info, and if I just hold my mouse over that, I can see that I have a whole bunch of a window popping up here. Load index numbers, comparisons, FAQs, frequently answered questions, technical bulletins, load inflation tables right there, okay? So we're going to go to load inflation tables. Oops, maybe we will. Things get a little bit trickier with Firestone Ag. Why? Well, because they can. Seriously. So this description here, you'll sometimes find these letters on the sidewall of the tire, but not always. Right? That's one of the first things as Firestone. Look for those, and sometimes you'll find them. Most times you will, but sometimes you won't. All right? So it can kind of be a crapshoot. One thing you probably want to tell your producers too, these are all in a PDF. So if they don't have a PDF reader, they need to download Adobe, all right, which is a free download, all right? Show them how to do it. Tell them it doesn't cost them anything, they'll be glad to do it. So we're going to look at this one right here. Let's go with the metric. Should we go with the metric? Yeah, let's go with the metric.
Sure.
Yeah. Why? Because I can. Okay.
Probably 10 pounds on the left.
Oh, the buggers.
In miles
Yeah.
per hour.
And miles per hour, yeah.
PSI,
And
Yeah.
PSI.
Good try.
Yeah, but that's all right. I got my metrics right here. We're good to go. Another thing we also note about this is we have different configurations. So I can have a single tire configuration, I can have a dual tire, or I can have triples. Any of your customers running triples on their four-wheel drives, There's a few around. I know of one big Bud tractor that's actually running quads. He's got 4 tires on each corner. That's kind of insane in my mind. It's totally insane, but if he's happy, then I'm happy too. All right, but 4 times 2,000 is 8,000, right? Is that right? Yeah. My math's terrible today. So 8,000 times 4 corners. Yeah, extrapolate that math. That's a horrendous amount tied up just in freaking tires, right? So, but anyway. So now we have to also know what configuration that your producer is running on all 4 corners, all right? And some of the configurations, especially on the front wheel assist tractors, loader tractor, we might have dual tires on the rear, but just singles on the front, all right? So that can kind of play a little bit merry havoc. But typically your front wheel assist tractors, the sizes front and rear are never going to be the same. I've never seen them the same size. I have on some real old tractors. There used to be one around where I was raised. It was called a Ford County. And it was a pretty older tractor, but it was a front wheel assist tractor where the front tires were exactly the same tire as the rear. And that was actually from the factory. That's the only one I've ever seen. Okay? So, same type of scenario. We weigh a tractor. Now, let's say that we have a 24,000 pound tractor. We'll pick it. We'll just stick with a 4-wheel drive because the math's a little bit easier. I have a dual tire configuration, all right? So I now have 24,000 pounds total, which is going to be supported by the air in 2, 4, 6, 8 tires. So that still means 3,000 pounds per tire, correct? So we're going to go along our let's just say we got this size tire just for ease. We're going to go along here until I find 3,000. We're looking good. Oh, right about there is 2,900 or 3,010. So which one would I choose?
Neither.
You sure about that?
3,000.
Split the difference.
Well, yeah, you could do that, except if I split the difference, I'm still going to be less than 3,000.
28.
So if I'm right in here,
Does your gauge go to half pound?
28. That's not a
Yeah.
half.
where are we at? Right here? If I split the difference between here?
28.5.
Yeah, that's going to be less than 3,000 though, right? We're going to be 29,800. So we're going to be pretty close to 3,000, right? So yeah, we could split the difference. I'll buy off on that, okay? I would not go, so we're along here, I would not go at 26 pound because I will be underinflated, all right, by about 100 pound per tire, all right? So that's underinflated, okay? So I would buy off that I would probably go with either 28 pound or up to 29 pound, either way, okay? But the thing that a lot of your producers will do if they look at these things, they'll figure out what the weights are, but they'll forget that we have this. And they'll maybe run along this line right here. I've got dual tires. Well, let's see, 3,000 pounds. So if I go at 21 PSI, I should be right in the money. Not even close. We're way underinflated. All right? And that's, in my chassis class, we cover wheels and tires pretty extensively, and I use these with my students, and that's the number one issue that they have, is they don't follow along if I have singles or duals or triples. And I make it very explicit in the instructions of the questions of what it is, but they just automatically go to the singles, which your producers are more apt to do, so they will be severely underinflated, okay? Now, in a tractor, a combine, yeah, they're gonna take life off the tires, right? They're gonna have maybe some wheel issues. If we do the same thing with an on-highway semi or a grain truck, which a lot of your producers have, that ups the ante. We've got some pretty serious safety issues. You've all driven down the highway and you've seen those black alligators, those big old chunks of tire. Mm-hmm. Why did they get there? Because the tire blew out.
Are those retreads or just
What's that?
are those typically retreaded tires?
Oh, no. Why did the tire blow out?
Sidewall.
Why?
Wrong inflation.
What?
Wrong inflation.
What type of wrong inflation?
Over.
No.
Really?
Under.
Really?
Under inflation. Yep. Because what is happening is that sidewall. When you're running at 65 miles an hour, that thing is, if it's underinflated, is going to flex to beat hell. And it is going to create some superheat. And once you start creating superheat, that starts creating superheat inside the tire. And correct me if I'm wrong, we have oxygen inside that tire. Boom. End of story. Okay, so underinflation, every time I see that, oh, he didn't have his tire gauge. All right? So in the field, it is an issue, yeah. On the highway, it's a serious, serious issue, okay? So I'm more apt to make sure that my customers who had, and a lot of my customers, they were actually grain farmers, so they had semis and little trucks and, tandems and all this happy horse stuff, and I made damn sure if they didn't have a tire gauge, hell, I just gave them one. All right, 20 bucks out of my pocket is nothing compared with him blowing that tire out, okay? So, questions on that one? All right, now I'm going to throw something else at you. So remember I talked about we're going to have weight splits. So we need to now put in one more. So what we did with these examples, we assumed that the total weight of that tractor was going to be evenly spread all over that tractor. All right? Four-wheel drive tractor, when I put the plow on the ground, we already agreed on this, that I want 50% of the effort on the front axle and 50% on the rear axle, which means I am going to have a what was called a weight transfer. So theoretically, some of the weight, so I'm sitting like this. When I put the plow on the ground, evens it out, even play, all right? So that is where you're going to have to do a little bit of math, because when you weigh the tractor, it's actually going to be, should be a little bit heavier on the front, right? Because it's static, it's not, there's no plows on the ground, nothing like that. So now you're going to have to kind of take that into account, all right? You can assume that you will have the weight transfer. That is assuming the tractor is ballasted correctly. So if you weigh that tractor, then you can get your front and your rear weights, get out your calculator, and figure out what the percentages of the total weight is on the front as it's sitting in the yard and what is on the rear. All right? So if we have 60% on the front axle and 40% on the rear axle, we're sitting like this, and I put the plow on the ground, I'm going to come to here. I'm never going to get to here. All right? We're still going to be too heavy on the front. So that's where we need to be talking about ballasting of the tractor. So we, as a tractor is sitting in the yard, maybe we need to put more weight on the rear end of that tractor, you know, such as suitcase weights. All right? Or any of you guys still using chloride in their tires, do you know? A chloride mix, either a 5 or a 7.5 pound mix.
One of our old ones at the ranch still has that.
Okay, the chloride in there, yeah.
Old tractor.
Old tractor, right. Oh, there's some of my customers had brand new tractors that had chloride in them. Yeah. So chloride is a liquid, and it's a mix of calcium and chloride and water. Okay? And I hate that stuff. It is extremely corrosive. It will eat the living crap out of your wheels and your paint and everything else it gets on. It's toxic. It's bad for the ground, bad for the environment. And it's very, very messy and very heavy to work with. And if you ever have, if you have in your tires and your producers have in their tires, they get an air leak or a flat tire, it's going to cost a lot of money to get that fixed. Okay, typically that's actually going to be in a tube. So we have tubeless and we have tubed tires. Pretty much all of your pickups and your passenger cars, your vans are going to be tubeless tires. So, but a tubed, there's actually a tube inside the tire. You've probably seen the lake where kids are on the air inner tubes. That's exactly what they are. That's actually of a tractor tire. Okay, so they pump the calcium in, but it's a good way of ballasting, but it's pretty permanent. In order to get that in and out, you have to call up the tire shop because it takes a special pump. And also on that, if your customers do have chloride in their tires, they need to actually get a special air gauge that will handle liquids. If they get an air inflation gauge to check the tire pressure that is just rated for air, the first time they use it will be the last time they use it. All right, so you check the packaging on the air gauges and it will say for liquid and air. If it just says air, then it doesn't work for liquid filled tires. Okay, learned that one the hard way. All right, most of your producers will have what we call suitcase weights. And they're actually just they're anywhere from a 50-pound to a 200-pound weight that you can actually hook onto a cradle on the piece of equipment. It could be a swather, it could be a combine, it could be a tractor, whatever. All right. Most of your large four-wheel drive tractors now, so back in the day when we used those suitcase weights, it was actually just a big chunk of flat steel is what it hooked onto. What they're doing now is some of those brackets that hold the weights, they're actually about 1,000 pounds a piece. So they're actually using that as a weight as well, okay, which kind of makes sense actually, all right? If your customer or your producer is using a tractor for multiple applications, might be pulling a little 12-foot toolbar. Same tractor is going to be used for baling hay. He might put it on his quick attach loader, then he's going to haul the hay. So you want to actually have different weights on those tractors, right? So if I'm baling hay, I probably don't need a whole bunch of weight on the rear end of that tractor. I probably want some more on the front, actually, is what I need. But if I'm using my loader with a grapple, I'm hauling hay, I probably want more weight on the back and not as much on the front. Suitcase weights are perfect. You just take the stupid things on and off as many times as you want, all right? Now, with that being said, be careful because some of those are kind of heavy, All right, so a cherry picker or something like that might be a real good idea too. Don't have them changing so they're going to blow out hernias and wreck their backs and all that good stuff, because trust me, that could happen very easily. Okay, so 50 pounds isn't too bad, but you up to some of those 200-pound weights. I mean, 200 pounds is pretty damn heavy. All right, so safety as well. Okay, so your suitcase weights is probably your better alternative if they're wanting to weight down the tractor. So that's where you get your weight splits. If you're way too heavy on the front, just sitting there, well, now we want to add some weight to the back. Then we want to re-weigh the tractor, crunch the numbers to see if we're within our weight splits. All right, and most of them, the weight splits I know you can get right off the John Deere website. You can get them right off the Case IH website. Okay, they're all out there. Oh, and by the way, probably the owner's manual has that too, if they have their owner's manual.